Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Decloak podcast. I am joined today with Paul Lee, who is a vCISO at Keypair and also a CISO at a digital asset stealth company. Welcome, Paul. How are you?
I'm good, mate. Thanks very much. Pleased to be here.
It's been a long time. I think
Yeah,
we tend to cross over when we're at a whole host of exhibitions.
exactly.
And
And it's
yeah,
usually you talking. Actually, I think they bring you in to shake it up a bit. You've got all these staid characters on the stage, kind of patting each other on the back, and then you just come up and go, "Ah, this is all bullshit."
I know, and that is, I guess, probably that's probably the whole where the inspiration has come from to build a podcast where we
Yeah,
can,
yeah.
have a bit of fun with it and kind of, navigate through a lot of bullshit because the
Yeah.
industry's full of it. So
Well, it's security, like business, is just people. It's all about people, and so yeah, you deal with highly functioning arseholes half the time. But
I
it's
know,
yeah,
and I would say this, Paul. I think every time I see you, I'll like it's almost like we don't stop laughing.
yeah.
And I was like, obviously obviously for the audience before this, we were having a good laugh, and it was like, oh no, we're going to revert into being school children and just giggle our way through this. So, but anyway, right. So
Game face.
let's it, let's it. Tiger face,
Yeah,
lemon
yeah.
face. So
Um, yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah.
Well, I'll just
Here we go.
I'll ju- I'll just kind of address like the way you introduced me. Obviously, I said right. Let's just say it as it is. So
Yeah.
I've had my own business for a little bit, the Keypair business. Do vCISO work predominantly, if I can choose, focused on cryptocurrency and distributed ledger security, and firms who are doing that. Sometimes as kind of advisory, but sometimes getting my hands dirty, or hiring. Like I'll kind of go in and help people hire. Um, but then the other side is, ultimately the day job. At the moment, I'm with a firm that's kind of wrestling with implementing digital assets, cryptocurrencies, into traditional investment portfolios. Um,
Which is a massive topic, and
yeah,
everyone's involved in it these days. So yeah,
yeah, and I'll probably, I mean, we're going to go live soonish, so I can probably do a proper chat about what the product is, and we
yeah.
can just
Listen,
and we can talk about the security aspect to that stuff.
yeah, I think that would be
Um,
an excellent follow up because there's probably lots of people in the digital asset realm, and everyone's
we
struggling
can
with
say crypto here. When I haven't got my
it.
suit and tie on yet, so we can
Yeah,
say
I'd imagine
cryptocurrency.
James, for our audience, James is our editor, and James will put in crypto across your face and make laser beams fire at your eyes and anything else that this maniac decides to
Or
put in.
every time I say digital assets, he's just going to be like crypto.
I
Um,
know, and it's going to
yeah.
cut to a guy talking about like that big equation about a crypto and half the classroom snoring like that.
I'm dying.
Yeah, yeah. Oh God, I need to meet James now. So you tell me that.
Oh, he's
Um,
a lunatic. I don't think he'll mind me saying that. But he's an outstanding editor and co-producer. Yeah,
oh, excellent, excellent. But a tiny bit about my past. So
yeah.
I would describe myself as probably a technical CISO. I like to be that person who kind of translates the technical side and the risks. And talk to the engineers and kind of basically we relate to each other. I hope that day never ends really. And then talking to management about what's really going on and kind of translate what they want. So I see myself as that middle person. um, and I think I always will, potentially, because I find that most utility come from what I've done in the past comes from
Yeah.
that middle play. Um, but yeah, and I've had a fair, I went from production IT type stuff all the way into security, fundamentally because it was just more interesting, and I was sick of people in management or senior management. I sound like a socialist. Well, I suppose I am from Liverpool. I, Someone in senior management kind of telling me what I should be doing in IT. I got super sick of it. So I just thought, right, security, it's a lot more esoteric, or was at the time. And so kind of it was just more interesting, and I get to have an opinion as opposed to having to choose cookie cutter solutions and
And
stuff.
I
So
think, this has been a huge debate I'm seeing on LinkedIn about should a CISO be technical. I think
I've seen that. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's like you should be able to speak all forms of the language, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Again, back to your point, you had people maybe above or different areas, and they're obviously trying to dictate a narrative. They can't even work a fucking iPhone. You know what I mean? It's like
Oh,
absolutely.
I've got some stories.
It kills me. It absolutely kills me, that narrative. Or you get somebody, I don't know, like maybe at a very senior level, and they're going on a tangent about technology, and you're like, man, people stopped using XP about 20 years ago. It's like,
Yeah.
so
No, authentication. Yeah, it's just like, oh, I don't want to use second factor. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. I'm sick of passwords. So why do I really need a password? I'm just like, I really want to punch you in the face right now, but I've got to engage with you.
yeah. And listen, I think part of being a CISO is there's a huge element around diplomacy, right?
Mm,
And it seems to be, I think you become more and more a diplomat or a
yeah.
politician even.
Mm,
And, I always use metaphors, analogies. I use them non-stop. I don't even think I speak a normal language anymore. And it's like, you wouldn't buy a big fancy house, have nice watches, nice cars, and not have a CCTV. You wouldn't have
yeah,
an insurance policy. You wouldn't have, depending if you're a high net worth client, you're going to have security guards, or you're going to be in a gated premises. And
yeah.
people don't think about it like that. And it's like, why would you have a $1 billion company and have like no security?
Well,
It's
I mean,
madness.
tangents galore now. But
Yeah.
I was reading the other day. I think it was just on LinkedIn. Actually, it's funny. LinkedIn is just Facebook for professionals these days, isn't it? And I saw this little bit, and he had a friend who was a CISO, and the CISO tried his best at a firm, but they had a breach, and then he was essentially vilified. It was a rather large firm, and then he was finding that he couldn't get a job because he was blamed basically.
Yeah.
So they wanted someone to blame and get rid of. So this analogy, this guy says, he goes, if you get the head of the Met Police or a chief detective or whatever in a city, and you say to him, get rid of all the crime, and the crime doesn't go away, you don't sack him and then vilify him and then get a new guy, do you? Like
That happens quite a lot with the Met Police, to be
yeah,
fair.
that's true. I don't know why I said the Met actually.
Yeah.
But then you have this idea that like people don't realize that well, this is something that's got to change.
Yeah.
But we've got to realize that being breached or being compromised in some way is a thing, and it's how you deal with it and how you prepare for it. But it's not a zero-sum game. Either I am doing a good job or I'm not doing a good job, as measured by whether I get breached or not. It's what you've got in place and how you mitigate the most of the risk that you can see, and then you kind of minimize what's left that you can see, and then you kind of think about what potentially can happen. But yeah, some businesses just don't get that.
Yeah, it's the same with like, if they've got a legal team and someone takes a class action lawsuit against them, or
Yeah.
they have a DSAR request. I've actually seen a DPO getting binned on the back of the amount of DSAR requests that they couldn't fulfill in time. And it's like, well,
Wow.
maybe there's a resource issue,
Yeah.
and it's like you'd walk by a building site and you see 500 days without an incident. I actually know a CISO who had to do that for the company because it was almost like they couldn't envision, or they couldn't interpret the data that was put in front of them to understand,
Yeah.
they're getting tens of millions of attacks, and they're like, but they were only concerned with, well, we've had 0 breaches in 500 days or something like that. And it was like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
not how you should quantify it. It should be, do you have an engaged culture, right? Do you
Yeah.
have a really good tech stack? Is it modern? Are you able to deliver for your customers, consumers, whatever it may be? Are you able to flourish in an environment and be educated? Because I think a lot of people that pull the strings in a company don't understand that you're the proverbial little boy or girl with a finger in the dam, and it's like, you want me to go over there and deal with some nonsense? Well, the finger's coming out and then there starts to be a leak, and then it's like,
Fingers coming out. I can see you just waving the finger, going, "Do you want me to take the finger out?"
I'm going to invest in a massive big, polystyrene effort. I don't even know what the material is. If you run about like this, just strike people down with it. Nah, I don't think that would go down well. But
just smite
again,
them,
James, please edit a massive finger in this footage. So anyway, right, I love this. This I think this has been my favourite episode today. So I think because it's like anticipated an absolute roller coaster with you, Paul, and
Yeah,
I genuinely we don't see enough of each other, and I think
absolutely.
when our worlds collide, everybody at the table's always laughing, having a good time, and also a bit of release from it can be quite cumbersome.
Yeah, no, it is a very
in our industry.
stressful. Yeah, I mean, I haven't kind of come on here to talk about the mental health stuff, but having all that stress on you and ideally a team as well, kind of to spread that load, and also partners ideally around the band that you can spread the load. But ultimately, when you hear conversations and your ears prick up and you're just like, oh my God, all you think of is what that means in 25 different ways that can all end in horror. And it is quite stressful. And then you've got to go, all right, well, I can't just freak out because no one listens to someone who's in histrionics. You've got to then kind of, it depending on the corporate culture, you've either got to write a memo or you've got to have a specific meeting with someone who you need to get buy-in first, because you know that if you bring this up in a managed meeting, they'll just, through ignorance or kind of like just a desire to not kind of rock the boat, they will kind of dive on you and kind of undermine the message. So you have to do all that groundwork because you know that something is happening that needs to be addressed, but you know that if you don't describe it well, people won't understand, and then you'll get sacked later, whether you knew it or not. And so that kind of stress, you're right, it sometimes does need, you do need to have a good laugh, and you do need to have a good kind of like chin wag with people who also understand that kind of craziness, because it is mental. I imagine it's like being a lawyer, like you said. They hear people saying stuff, and you're just like, "Whoa, my God, could you stop saying that, please?"
Yeah, I know, because then that people don't understand that then adds you into that mix, and then you need to add your expertise and skills, because ultimately we're the guardians of the realm. We're
Yeah,
like, I can envision. I've been in scenarios where it's like, Jon Snow, the Battle of the Bastards, and
yeah,
it's like they're just enclaved, and the dudes are getting their heads trampled on, and
yeah.
and it's just like, oh my God, because I never read the books, and I'm sitting there going, Jesus Christ, Jon Snow, what the hell? And then the veil come rounded in, and it's like, yes, here we go. We don't get a lot of that. We don't get a lot of the proverbial ally running in to save us. I've worked in companies where we've had amazing infrastructure teams, and they'll step in and say, hey, we need to back them here, because they're managing security. We're not. We're just provisioning services and everything else. So I mean, you get lots of material for James, by the way, and I keep referring to James, and people are going to go, who is James? I'm actually going to do an episode with James so people can see him. I'll do an intro of James. But anyway,
that's boss. No, it's really good. No, there was I wish I remembered the guy's name. There was a guy who did. He's in our kind of little London CISO kind of group. Oh, flip, forgot his name. I'll try and I'm sure you'll post this on LinkedIn. I'll at him when I remember. But he's really good. He's all about the numbers, and he's all about the translation to management. But he's got this brilliant slide, which you were talking about, kind of all that stuff, and you're in the trenches. A lot of times it's the other way around. It's not like people don't even realize there's a fight, and they see you as the Casandra running around, and no one listens. So it's really interesting. Like well, when you finally get the company galvanized to kind of mobilize, it's great. But actually getting that tipping point is tough, because you tend to do feel like the Casandra, and then you're like, okay, well, I can only listen to the top 5 risks, and you're like, oh shit, there's so many. Okay, right, top
there's 5,000. It's funny, like just for a US audience, right? I don't even know if we will have a US audience, but I like to say that makes me feel good about myself. But you're asking, who is this Casandra? Who is this Casandra? It's actually a Karen, okay?
Karen.
A Karen. So James put in a Karen somewhere.
Go ahead, put me on social media. You're a little punk. Seriously, I called the cops.
Again, circling back, Paul, in terms of like...
Let's drag this. Let's get the crane and put the train back on the tracks.
That's it. I know, because we're away somewhere. So give me one or two challenges you've faced in the industry.
Right. Okay, so the biggest one, I mean, I'll just talk about it again. It comes up time and again, is trying to translate the problems into something that management cares about.
Yeah.
That has been my biggest issue, and in the past I've been shit at it.
Yeah.
Because I've been an IT guy looking at problems and thinking and saying to myself and others, this is obvious. Like this is like, there's the top 10. We can just go it now. I don't even have to create a roadmap. Like literally, these are the 10 things, and I'm going to go and do with my roadmap. Give me approval for them, and then I'll put the structure in because that's important as well. But ultimately, my every fiber of my being says that these things need doing, but that doesn't work. You've got to translate it into a message that they understand. And that's the biggest problem I've ever had. And I think one of the biggest problems, I don't want to predict the future, but I think I'll ever have, because I always, I haven't found that great needle of kind of what's enough and what's too much. I was always that guy who would delve the minds of Moria, like in a management meeting, and people are like, "Oh, well, thanks for that, Paul," and I'm just like, "Oh shit, what have I done? I've done it again." So it's that's a big thing. And then also hiring people who are master bullshitters is a problem.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about that. Like they'll come in and they'll be aspirational. I had a lot more of that in the States than I had it in the UK, because in America you're taught to fake it before you make it. In security, that works in sales, that works in marketing potentially. I mean, I'm just kind of trampling on everyone else's disciplines, but it's a lot about character and stuff like this. But in security and IT, I was recruiting for IT when I was over there. It just doesn't work. And so, yeah, a problem I find, it's difficult for me to dig through, because security is all about like solving interesting problems and seeing patterns and being relatable to other people around the business. There's a lot of different skills, and people have like a focus and a kind of ability set that doesn't tend to do everything, and that's fine. But trying to figure out like who's good and who's not, like I said, sifting out the bullshitters is really, really hard. So those two things: management, translation of kind of what the business you believe the business should be doing on the security side, and indeed not on the security side, maybe just practices and how they do stuff, which people do not want you poking in. So then kind of showing, if I don't poke in here and you don't do this, then potentially we'll have this problem. And then the other thing, which is just trying to filter the candidates.
The translation aspect of it is always a pain for everybody. It's
Yeah.
almost like they don't tell you what they need because they don't understand what they need.
Yeah.
And I think, obviously you have data, you bring it back to the relevant points of the company, can we survive? Does it impact money? Is anybody going to jail, kind of thing?
What are the market comparables in their terminology? In our terminology is, what have we seen in the papers and online, like that companies that are kind of like us that do roughly the same thing that have been hacked. And so that's, it's market comparables, I try and call it, because that's in private equity. It's like, well, how do I measure the value of my private company against other companies that don't publish their data? So there's this understanding. So using that's one I mentioned because that helped, because I was like, right, okay, in terms of hacking, these are the market comparables, and you just go,
Even then, I think sometimes people don't care. They're only in it for themselves. That's another thing. Back to the bullshitters. That goes internally. There's probably a huge percentage of people that you'll engage with within your organization that are an absolute fraud.
I
can say this because I've covered multiple roles. I've been in the game 20 years.
Yeah.
Did okay. And it's like, when people kind of stack up against you, it's like, for me, I'm just like, but you're talking absolute shit. You're basically a glorified QA engineer. No disrespect to QA engineers, but you're getting someone at VP level. It's like, why do we need a SIM? Why do we need a firewall? It's like, you're starting to go, wow.
It's those conversations. So Mark Twain, that famous line, he's like, never have an argument with an idiot, because they'll drag you down to their level and beat you on it through experience. And you're just like, you're up there, you're going, there's all the real reasons, but you don't even understand the language I'm speaking.
Yeah. And I think it kills me as well, back to the whole point that I guess, as a challenge within our industries, they seem to get more backing than anybody else.
Yeah.
I was on a call with a CISO recently. I won't name them, right? And nothing to relating to the podcast. And they were like, I've actually gave less, I care less, and I get more done. And I'm like, how is that possible? Is it because we inherently are like, we're like the father of the group or the mother of the group, you know, and we're like, we want to protect everybody. And like, sometimes you're just like, you know, if your son's a moron, he's a moron. He needs to figure it out for himself. You know, or your daughter's going to do something crazy on an Ibiza holiday. It's like, you know, you're kind of like, it's just one of the things. Sometimes you just need to kind of go, well, they need to learn these things for themselves sometimes. And it was quite an interesting philosophy.
It works well if you've set yourself up, assuming that you are seen as the person who needs to protect the firm, right? Let's just assume that that's what a CISO is seen as inside the firm. If you've set yourself up well and given people clear guardrails and guidance, that management, senior management, the person who you both report to, ultimately, if they get that you've done that, then that might work, because then they may see this person and go, oh, well, you were told, and that could happen. But that is a needle that would be difficult to thread. I think most people would just jump and go and not really worry about the fog of war that's going on at your level and this other person's level. They would just see that security stuff had happened and it had gone bad, and you're the security guy. So, but yeah, if you can get oh my God, I mean, this is the holy grail. If you can get the CEO or the senior management team or some kind of risk committee that actually has power to actually buy into the value of what you think is important, and then you can kind of drag other people that need to be dragged. A lot of people can be walked, and you know, and a lot of people are just looking for some guidance, but it's those people who are ultimately going to be the ones who screw the company that listen least.
But do you know, it's crazy. They're happy to have that Ronin style samurai at times. Right, the person Sun Tzu who creates the philosophy and everything else, and it's like, right, we go to war, we win, we defeat our enemies, whatever it is. Then you come back with the metaphoric head of the kingdom, and you're like, there you go. And then they go, well, it's not good enough. It's like, I've just slayed an entire empire here and created a philosophy and a book that'll last the test of time for military strategy. You know, I know I'm going in a complete tangent. It's probably my blood sugar right now because it's early for me. So, but you know, I mean, I think they're quite happy to allow you to go and do what you need to do. But then when it comes to the serious stuff, it's like, right, you know, what's next? And I think they at times are maybe just overwhelmed by what you've achieved. And I think maybe sometimes they feel threatened by it. And also I think maybe...
It sounds like you've had a much more successful career than I have. So I don't think I've ever overwhelmed management with my security achievements. So like, I think, well done.
Well, listen, I mean, it's kind of a difficult one to talk about because you don't want to become... You don't want the ego to take over, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm due some toast in a minute. So, but no, I mean, I think, again, it comes down to a kind of philosophy of, you know, I look at so many of my peers and I go, wow, I mean, I would love to operate at that level. Or I name dropped a few people recently, like Dr. Eric Cole. I love watching his channel. Dr. Cole needs to get on this podcast.
Yeah.
People need to respond to me and stop ignoring me. Because I'm like, I love your YouTube channel.
Add me.
I know, it's like, let's just be friends. Dr. Cole, come on. Because he's a good, I mean, his insight's amazing.
Then space on the couch next to me, Dr. Cole. Come on, let's watch TV.
Let's I know, and let's just chill.
Let's relate.
Do you know, I tell you what, if I met him in real life, he'd probably have me in the gym with him. Because he's you know, I think he's at a certain age now where it's like he's 10xing on the health, and it's like, you know, he's looking good. So I know I'm like buttering his arse here, but I'm like, Dr. Cole. So if anybody listening to this knows Dr. Eric Cole, he's a legend. He needs to be on this channel. Come on, make it happen. Because I've reached out to a few people, and it's like, oh, we'll get my people to get in touch. You're like, cut the bullshit. Get your people to get in touch.
Just get on. Come on.
It's like, I've seen another thing I'm going to rant about is people who have an executive assistant or a PA. You cannot manage your email.
I want a PA. Stop it. I'm kind of aspirational. No, I mean, do I need one? God knows. I mean, I'm one of the most disorganized.
I would only have one to deal with vendor
emails.
emails. Yeah, because you get hundreds of vendor emails every day. It's just that, there you go. That person can deal with them, or you can just automate it. But anyway, right? Sorry, we're going on these lovely tangents.
Yes. Yeah. So you asked me to think about something that was
A
that
topic
I
that
think.
needed relevance and cleaning up the industry. Yeah.
So something the way I interpreted that question is, in my role, what am I just super worried about, and what needs to be dealt with? And so, what is the core of any security paradigm? It's identity. Whether it's the identity of a service account or it's the identity of a human trying to do stuff, and predominantly, it's the humans that we have to worry about. And I don't want to say AI all the time, but ultimately, there are programs now which are driven by, the ever decreasing barriers to entry for what will we call it? Human overlay, realistic human overlay. So, we've had the ability to create amalgams of, or avatars, whatever, dark avatars of people
Terrible movie.
yeah, no. If you have enough footage and recordings of someone, you can create a simulacrum of them, and we've known that existed. But that is, can deliver a speech, can talk and have a soliloquy, and you're fine. But the whole backwards and forwards, having something behind this face that is responding, not just to easily predictable questions, but also to just kind of wild, happenstances, and you just kind of react like a human and make sure that the people on the other side of this screen believe them. So we are now at the point where that is happening. Now, it may be a little bit kind of hokey or quirky at the edge that people kind of go, "Oh, what was that?" But I think these AIs, these responding characters, with the with the overlay, the realistic overlay of people that they trust, they are definitely at this point capable of fooling someone. And you mentioned, I'll let you talk about bring up the Hong Kong CFO. Like, I don't know whether you want to give some detail for anyone who's not aware of that.
Yeah. So recently, chief financial officer was tracked via deepfake methods to basically compromise them for, was it 25 million?
25 million, yeah. And I think that was dollars, but it could have been Hong Kong dollars. But either way, it's a lot of money.
That's about the extent of what I know of it, because
fair enough. No, fair
I'm
enough.
still laughing at the fact that it happened.
No, well, what got me was this person was on a video call, multinational company. So there's a lot of people around the world, and then when certain things happen, especially like moving a lot of money, their internal process was, or protocol was, that they get onto a call and it has to have a yay, a verbal live yay. Presumably they said they recorded it. I don't know whether there was any other kind of sign off or anything like that. It sounds like not, just a verbal. But I imagine, that guy would be recording that meeting just to make sure. But the idea is that he gets the verbal from X amount of people. One guy was in Tokyo, another guy was in the west coast of California. There was someone else either in Malaysia or Singapore, but they were in different countries. And they all joined this call, and they all people he knows and works with, and they'd all received, well, he'd received an email saying, right, we need this to happen, and they appear as he would expect, and they all, in their own voices, with their own faces, and I imagine to some extent with a bit of back and forth. So we imagine it's one of these live response situations. You've either got a person with this other person's face, or you've got kind of some simulacrum, which isn't the case yet. I think it's more likely that it's just a human with an overlay, a veil.
The Tom Cruise stuff. Have you seen that? The deepfake Tom Cruise guy.
Yeah,
it's amazing. Vote for Tom, and he's just like running constantly. It's like, I'd vote for him. He'd be a better president than Biden, that's for sure.
Oh, we're gonna go there.
Oh, we're gonna go there. Yeah.
Anyway, the point was, it was a full-on ad hoc meeting, people he trusts, people who are required to give authority to him to do this thing, and he did it. And the police are not charging him. They don't think that it was a conspiracy.
Were these other people's accounts and the numbers spoofed?
So that was the thing. He didn't check the numbers. Basically, they just dialed in. It wasn't the numbers. It was more, they weren't. They came in, and was it a Zoom call? I think it was a Zoom call.
Zoom bombing thing that happened during the pandemic. Yeah.
Well, Well, it's not just that. No, they had arranged the call. They'd sent him the invite. He
I'm no
joined it.
longer laughing now that I've been fully educated on this
Yeah,
subject.
yeah.
It's
No,
actually quite terrifying. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, because it's like, well, how does he verify? Would he bother? It's just like, sorry, I'm a relatively junior. Well, I'm a CFO, but I'm important. But obviously, these other people require, I require their their authority. So then you're not going to go, hang on, I'm just going to click on all of yous and make sure that the
Well,
email
you would
address is
assume there
right.
would be like an email confirmation or some sort of a kind of like stage. Like if you're using like a SaaS platform, it would
Yeah,
be like, here's the different approvers. You know, it's not just one guy.
yeah.
And they're taking a verbal approver. So, yeah.
Yeah. So obviously the process was bad, because because you should need some form of application that needs you to log in, authenticate properly, and then go right and live on the call. You just make sure they do it. But yeah, so that's the major issue, isn't it? Like the verbal assent thing.
Mm.
But the thing I wanted to talk about really was just the fact that this is even possible. Um, it's and I was working recently for Verif up until December, and
Yeah.
Verif is a identity verification IDV provider like Jumio and the like, and they were struggling with it. Like their whole um, they and they're not alone. You know, it's not a Verif problem. It's an industry problem. They were being asked. I remember talking to Gartner, and Gartner was saying, "Right, we're talking to all of your peers, and no one's got this solved, by the way. So please be candid." So that coming from Gartner, um, they yeah, that was actually in a report, so you don't have to edit that bit. Like yeah. Anyway, so the so the idea is that all of them are using ML, machine learning, to look for signals of badness or basically consistent signals of goodness in an IDV session to just figure out whether there's do they pass the sniff test? Not only whether you're holding the correct identification for who this person is, but also has this identity been linked to other signals which might be deemed negative? But then you now have to, so that's the traditional kind of IDV thing. Now you have to figure out whether this person's even real in the first place.
Mm.
Like and the models aren't geared to that, and they are having to be geared to that because there's no one who can tell you that they wouldn't that someone who was sufficiently sophisticated wouldn't pass that. So that's a big thing. And I think the way to get around it, over to you. Actually, what do you reckon about that? I mean,
No, I think again, it's like, how do you like authenticate? So first of all, if I'm trying to solve this, I'd be like, right, everybody has a company mobile.
mm,
That mobile's on some sort of an Active Directory.
mm,
And also, if Zoom or Teams or Hangout had the capability to authenticate a token,
mm,
that would be the bridging point. So you would know every time you're on a call that you're speaking to David, Angela, whoever, that it's actually them. But at the same point, like if you're going to be dishing out a certain amount of money beyond a threshold,
yeah.
it's like follow up by
So
email. Do you know what I
yeah.
mean?
No, no, you're right. It's funny. My old boss, my old CISO said, "What was it? You're trying to solve uh, a $20,000 problem with a $100,000 solution. That's not good security,
Yeah,
and that doesn't work. And obviously, the $20,000 figure has to come from somewhere real. Is that the risk to the business, or is that just how much money someone lost in a single instance, whatever? So you have to figure that out. But yeah, it's got to be a proportional response to the real risk at play. But I've always been in the fintech and finance kind of industries. Say always, mostly, and so usually there are parts of the business that are moving a lot of money, or the software allows other people to move a lot of money.
yeah,
And so when you're thinking about this stuff, you have to think about it in the terms of existential threat to your company. Because if someone says, "I've just completely subverted your platform and stole a ton of cash," like a lot of customers are going to go, right, I'm going to invoke that clause, which is the equivalent of force majeure, and just I'm off.
yeah.
You're just rubbish. So yeah, we have to think about this stuff. And I think, all right. So relying on one single authentication factor, obviously everyone knows rubbish. But in the crypto world, especially with some qualified custodians, they do rely on video calls, or they did. So it's just like, all right, well, this is the ultimate. I'm going to get my 5 people in the vault on site, but you're going to have to do a video call into me, and I'm going to and basically verbally affirm the email you've just sent. That's the way it was.
Mm.
And then, but they kind of rely and they go, well, it's totally cold, and we've disaggregated the system, and we sign the transactions offline, blah 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 blah. But anyway, it all came down to a phone call. But nowadays, God, I sound old nowadays. Nowadays, we've got the phone call, which is great, but we also have I authenticated into the system of records? Have I then verified a request that maybe someone else
Yeah.
has requested? And is there some form of
Traceability.
approval flow? Yeah, and the traceability that comes from the authentication factor in the first place. And I'll just say one thing. So, because this is supposed to be, I guess, the main event really. But what I've seen work kind of really well is you have, when you're onboarded, let's say, so I'll just talk about Uphold. So this is where I used to work.
Okay.
I was a CISO of a crypto trading platform. So we were like, oh my God, how do we make sure that people are who they say they are? And what you do is you take as much data, and this really fucks up the pipeline. Marketing and sales hate this, but you take as much data or as many factors as possible up front, so that you can then, when they are at risk, because no hacker's going to give a shit about someone who's got no money in the system
Yeah.
yet. Although there are attacks that kind of try and seed a ton of verified accounts that they can use later, which is a different issue. But if you've got like any user, you kind of, you're like, okay, what phone are they using? Can I get them to download an app as part of this process that I can then get them to, take a scan a QR code, or basically then add as a secondary form of authentication. And then, you then get them to do an IDV on that device, and then you say, right, can you then basically, if you've got 2 devices, brilliant, because you've now made it so much harder for someone else to impersonate them. You've got the phone and you've got the web. Now, a lot of people are like, well, I don't care about the web. I want to use my phone. It's like, okay, but ultimately trying to sell that message of the more we know about you, the more I can protect you. Some people buy that, and some people just think it's a marketing ploy. But anyway, that's the idea. Gather as much data as possible, as much heuristics that you can then compare later to what is actually happening, especially when you have an exit event, like you've got someone trying to take out 100 grand from your account or whatever. You'd be like, let's go right back. Are you using the same phone? No. Ooh, I'm going to have to make it difficult for you. But anyway, sorry, I'm going off on one, but this was a big problem.
Yeah, and I think it deserves, I think because it's still relatively new, there's probably not enough mainstream coverage. There's probably not enough security experts looking at this sort of kind of domain. And I think that's why obviously it needs a bit of relevance in cleaning up.
Yeah.
So we're probably going to end on our last part of the podcast, which is the one thing in cyber that you think is bullshit and needs to change or needs a focus.
SMS authentication. It's authentication again. Sorry, mate. I know it's a tech thing, but I still, to this day, 10 years ago, I had arguments with people about how easy it is to clone someone's SIM card. And it's even easier today, but people still have SMS authentication. Like you're essentially, if you want to target someone, high net worth individuals, which are the people I have to deal with all the time because of the various roles I've had the various industries I've been in, I tend to deal with that side rather than the retail finance. There's always this factor of people who, if you can get them, you can get a ton of money. And so usually this kind of high motivation factor of someone who wants to steal from someone. You just want to get it from one place, don't you? You don't have to hack 10 million people. So these ultra high net worth individuals, so they're being told that SMS is still valid. And it's not. Like what you're doing is, if you have SMS as your second factor, it's almost as bad as having email as your second factor.
Yeah.
Which, when people say second factor, can we have it as email? I'm like, that's not a second factor.
Yeah.
Because email is tied to, it is the identity of the account. It is a factor, So anyway, when people talk about that, it's essentially the same as hacking their email. Because if you have got an ultra high net worth individual's email, if you've already hacked that, which is, it depended on the individual and how they do things, you could just pay off their girlfriend, which I've seen happen.
Wow.
So and then you add, like, loads of email accounts have this secondary email address, and then they'll do that on the slide. They'll change it so they can subvert it. right, if they've got that in place, the only thing they need to know now is what their email, what their phone number is. And then they don't need anything other than the phone number to go away and clone it. And so then,
Sim jacking attacks are like
yeah.
massive
Oh my
now.
God, it's like $10. It used to be $10, it's probably $2 now.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, one thing that enrages me is SMS authentication. Like, it's just not a thing. SMS round trip to verify you, to send you text messages when it's valid or whatever, but just as notifications, no bloody links. But SMS in general and SMS authentication just really, really grinds my gears. And yeah, when product people come up and go, oh, we're going to start with SMS, I'm like, no, let's just have the authentication in the app. And then when they want to do something important, you just get them to go on a website on their machine, and then you just go, okay, fine, I have this and I have this, and we're good. And that's a nice flow. The biometrics. Let's stick with that and tell people.
It's so much easier and faster as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, cool.
Exactly.
I love it. And I mean, it would be interesting to just to jump on the dark web and have a look to see how much it would cost for a SIM hijack attack.
So, yeah, I mean, people sell this stuff all the time. Like, they'll get batches of 1,000 numbers that have already been compromised, they believe. And then they have bespoke services where they'll say, right, you can buy 100 cloned SIMs up front, and then just give me the numbers. Some of them, some carriers in the world are harder than others because of other secondary kind of factors that you have to do, and the way the SIM authenticates to the network itself. But most of them, especially in the US, are still really easy. They've got this problem, the same problem they had with debit cards. So they didn't have chip and pin for so long.
Because there's so much money to be made off of fraud as well, where insurance claims, and it's kind of some incestuous relationship. And again, any audience in the US can maybe clarify that, because I think we're chip and pin for 10 years or something.
Oh yeah, longer.
Probably longer.
We were chip and pin 2009 when I left for the US, and then I was there for 9 years. Came back, and it still wasn't rolled out. So
that's wild.
Yeah.
Nice one. So yeah, on that note, then Paul,
on that bombshell,
wrap it up. We'll leave the chip and pin mystery to the ether. But again,
Jurassic Park.
Yeah, again, so don't even get me started on Jurassic Park. A terrible movie franchise, but anyway. So yes, thanks very much for your time, Paul. And then we'll obviously catch up soon. We'll have a follow-up later on, and then that'll be good.
That'll be good. And then I'd love to be invited to the kind of like 10-year anniversary of Leo's podcast, where we get all the kind of people, the fan favorites. I'd be trying to pitch for that one.
I know. I actually think this episode is going to have the most animation in it. If it's going to actually cost me.
We should have waved our arms more.
Episode 1, I was like jazz hands. It's crazy, absolute crazy. But listen, it's the first episode, nerves, and you've got an amazing guest like Robin Smith, who's on the first one. So it's like you need to have your enthusiasm. But
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, they get it, and they also, sometimes it's fun to be the straight guy.
On that note, cool.
See you later, mate.
I'm gonna cheers. Bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye bye.